In 2026, the idea of a cheap house in America sounds almost like a joke. A $250,000 home used to feel like a middle-class starter home. Now, for millions of people, even that price feels out of reach. The strange part is that these homes still sell fast. So the real question becomes, who is actually buying them? Let's start with the math. If someone buys a $250,000 house with a typical 10% down payment, that's $25,000 upfront. Already, most Americans are struggling. Surveys keep showing that many people don't even have $1,000 saved for emergencies. Saving $25,000 while paying rent, groceries, insurance, and student loans can take years. And that's before we even talk about the monthly payment. Now add interest rates. In the early 2020s, people were spoiled by ultra-low mortgage rates. Those days are gone. By 2026, mortgage rates have settled into a much higher, new normal. That same $250,000 home can easily mean a monthly payment around $1,700 to $2,000 once you include taxes and insurance. Lenders usually want your housing payment to stay below about 30% of your income. That means the buyer likely needs to earn somewhere around $70,000 to $80,000 per year just to qualify comfortably. Here's the shock. The median individual income in the United States still sits well below that. So right away, the average single person is priced out of the cheap house market. This is the first big shift in the housing story. Buying even a modest home is no longer a solo mission for most people. That's why dual-income households dominate the market. Two people earning $40,000 to $50,000 each suddenly make the math work. Couples are buying later, moving in together earlier, and combining finances sooner, not always for romance, but for survival. The starter home has quietly become the starter couple home. Then there are remote workers. One of the biggest changes after 2020 was the rise of location freedom. Someone earning a big city salary in tech, marketing, or finance can now live in smaller cities where homes still cost around $250,000. To them, these homes feel affordable, even cheap. This creates a strange imbalance where local residents feel priced out by people moving in from higher-paying regions. Another group buying these homes is older homeowners downsizing. Millions of Americans bought homes years ago when prices were far lower. Many are now selling houses worth $500,000 or more and moving into smaller, cheaper homes. When you walk into a closing with hundreds of thousands in equity, a $250,000 house doesn't feel expensive at all. Cash offers from downsizers have quietly become one of the biggest forces in the housing market. Investors are another piece of the puzzle. Small real estate investors look at a $250,000 home and see a rental property. With rents climbing year after year, the numbers often make sense. If a property can generate steady rent and long-term appreciation, investors compete with regular buyers. For first-time buyers, competing with someone treating the house like a business deal can feel impossible. Family money also plays a growing role. The bank of mom and dad has become one of the largest sources of down payments in America. Parents who benefited from cheaper housing decades ago are helping their kids enter the market. Without that help, many first-time buyers would still be renting. This creates a growing divide between people who have financial support and those who don't. And then there's the group people don't talk about enough, buyers stretching their finances to the limit. Some are taking on higher debt, accepting longer commutes, or cutting spending in other areas just to get into the market. They're not necessarily comfortable, they're determined. For many, owning a home still represents stability, security, and a chance to build wealth over time. So who can afford a $250,000 house in 2026? It's not the average single worker anymore. It's couples combining incomes, remote workers bringing big city pay to smaller towns, older homeowners downsizing with equity, investors chasing rental income, families helping with down payments, and determined buyers willing to stretch their budgets. The real story isn't just about housing prices. It's about how the definition of affordable has quietly changed. A $250,000 home used to be a milestone. Today, it's the entry ticket, and the line to get in keeps getting longer. In 2026, the phrase, starter home, sounds completely different than it did just a decade ago. A $250,000 house used to represent the first step into homeownership for young families, recent graduates, and middle-class workers. Today, many Americans scroll past listings at that price and think the same thing: who can actually afford this anymore? And yet, these homes still sell. They sell fast, sometimes with multiple offers, sometimes in cash. So the real story isn't that nobody can afford a $250,000 home, it's that the type of person who can afford one has quietly changed. To understand this shift, you have to start with the basic math of buying a house. A $250,000 home sounds manageable until you look at the upfront cost. Even with a modest 10% down payment, buyers need $25,000 in cash just to get through the door. That doesn't include closing costs, inspections, moving expenses, and the endless list of small purchases that come with homeownership. Realistically, the upfront cost can creep toward $35,000 or more. For millions of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, that number feels impossible. And then comes the monthly payment. Mortgage rates in 2026 are no longer the ultra-low numbers people got used to earlier in the decade. Higher interest rates have quietly rewritten the affordability equation. That same $250,000 home could mean a monthly payment approaching $1,800 to $2,000 once you include property taxes and insurance. Lenders typically want housing costs to stay under about 30% of your income. That means a buyer may need to earn roughly $75,000 to $85,000 per year to comfortably afford this starter home. Here's where the reality hits. The median individual income in the United States is still far below that number. In other words, the average single person is no longer the target buyer for an entry-level house. The dream of buying a home solo in your 20s has slowly shifted from normal to rare. This is the first major change in the housing story. Homeownership is no longer designed for one income. That's why dual-income households dominate today's starter home market. Two people earning average salaries can suddenly make the numbers work. Couples are moving in together sooner, combining finances earlier, and treating homeownership as a shared project instead of an individual milestone. The starter home has quietly become the starter couple home. Even roommates and siblings are teaming up to buy property together, something that was once unusual but is now becoming common. Remote work has created another new class of buyers. When location stopped being tied to employment, geography stopped limiting housing choices. Someone earning a salary from a big city like San Francisco or New York can now live in smaller cities where homes cost a fraction of big city prices. To them, a $250,000 home doesn't feel expensive, it feels like a bargain. This has created a ripple effect where people moving from high-income regions compete with local residents who earn much lower wages. To the local buyer, prices feel sky-high. To the remote worker, they feel discounted. Older homeowners are also reshaping the market in a huge way. Millions of Americans bought homes years ago when prices were dramatically lower. Over time, those homes gained value, sometimes doubling or tripling. Now many of these homeowners are downsizing. They sell a house worth $500,000 or $600,000 and move into something smaller and cheaper. When you show up to a closing with hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity, a $250,000 home feels incredibly affordable. Many of these buyers pay in cash, which makes their offers extremely competitive. For first-time buyers trying to finance a home, competing against cash offers can feel impossible. Investors are another major force behind who can afford these homes. Small real estate investors see a $250,000 property differently than a family does. They don't look at it as a place to live, they see a business opportunity. If the property can generate steady rental income, the purchase makes financial sense. With rents rising year after year, investors often calculate that the property will pay for itself over time while also gaining value. This means first-time buyers aren't just competing with other families, they're competing with people treating the house like a long-term investment. Then there's the role of family support, sometimes called the bank of mom and dad. This is one of the most powerful and least discussed forces in modern homeownership. Parents who bought homes decades ago often benefited from lower prices and rising home values. Many now help their children with down payments or co-sign loans. Without this support, many first-time buyers would still be renting. This trend has quietly created a growing divide between people who receive financial help and those who don't. Student loan debt also plays a big role in who can afford a home. Many younger buyers are balancing rent, car payments, and student loans while trying to save for a down payment. Even if they earn a good salary, the extra debt reduces how much they can borrow. This pushes many potential buyers out of the market or forces them to wait longer before purchasing a home. Another surprising group entering the market is people who are simply tired of renting. Over the past decade, rents have risen dramatically in many areas. Some renters realize that their monthly rent is close to what a mortgage payment would be. Even if buying feels